What's crack-a-lackin', gang? We've made it. We're there. It is the final unit of the year. We've got a few weeks left, hopefully. Fingers crossed here. So we're going to kick back and we're going to do something a little bit lighter and a little bit more kind of just like pleasure-driven, we'll say. We're going to be taking care of some creative writing. So this is our first really 2 days of creative writing. We're going to be focusing on, as we have in the past, imagery and sensory detail. To give us kind of an overview of the unit first, what is this thing all about? What are we going to be doing? Well, we're going to use many of the techniques and devices that we've examined throughout the entire year to create original work. So that means things like repetition, figurative language, purposeful structure, and of course, today's focus, imagery and sensory detail. We're also going to be focusing on revision and how we use revision to augment and refine our work. Basically, how we use revision to improve the quality of our piece and help others understand our ideas with greater clarity. We're going to have to make choices, and we're going to have to think about the effects that we want our choices to have. This means thinking about, okay, if I use this technique, why am I using it? What do I want to do? We want to be more conscious of what we do in our writing. And then finally, we're going to have to consider our own individual personal taste, and we're going to have to use that consideration to develop our own voices further. We have to think about what we like, how we can incorporate that into our repertoire, and think about who we are as writers, what our style is. Why are we doing this? Well, there's a lot of reasons. Utilizing voice is the mark of a strong writer. And frankly, these days, colleges know that every single one of you can write a pretty basic 5-paragraph essay. Structure overall is becoming less important because everybody knows the basics. What higher learning institutions and what the rest of the world is looking for now is you using voice in a way that is both creative and helpful in terms of understanding your ideas, using techniques effectively. Okay, literary and rhetorical devices and techniques, they enhance our writing and they make our communication more effective. They help people understand whatever the hell it is we're talking about. Finally, understanding craft from the inside makes understanding craft from the outside that much easier and natural, meaning that if we can do it ourselves, we can generally understand why writers do it. As all of us are going to be going into IB next year, this is going to be increasingly important to be able to analyze things a little bit more naturally and immediately. All right, where is all of this headed? So we have, I'm doing scare quotes right now, children. Final project for this unit, which will be a portfolio of 3 creative writing pieces. You're going to be allowed to select 2 from works that we've already created for class, whether it be this unit or things that we've made earlier in the year. And then you must generate at least 1 final original piece from a large list of options you're going to be given. That's going to be given to you probably the next couple of days. The 3 pieces you select will need to be revised, though, to improve them and make them even sharper. That is going to be a massive component of this, is taking work that you've already created and improving upon it. All right, enough of this stuff. Let's talk about our first technique, imagery and sensory detail. So if you're getting into your note sheet, this is going to be where your definition is going to go. Now, imagery and sensory detail is appealing to the 5 human senses and emotions. So that's sight, sound, taste, touch, smell, but also our feelings like anger, happiness, sadness. And this makes our writing much more relatable. People can understand where we're coming from. It makes it engaging, more interesting to read, and it makes it much more clear and easy to understand for the reader because it gives them important information and it gives them important details. Any description that relates to our senses or our emotions is considered sensory detail. And finally, sensory detail is crucial for meaningful description, but it also contributes very heavily to tone and mood. Tone being the writer's attitude about what they are discussing, and mood being the emotions the reader is supposed to feel during a reading. So when we're thinking about each of these different components of sensory details, we need to understand what we're focusing on, what aspects we need to describe in order to really stick the landing. So first we have sight. Now with sight, this is the most common piece of sensory detail. It has its own word, imagery. We're thinking about colors, size, shape, brightness, texture, distance, how close or far away something is, and then nuances, those little details that can provide really important information. Okay, think about the little details when you're describing something big that are going to communicate the most stuff to the reader. Next, sound. With sound, we're thinking about things like volume, tone, clarity, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant. And with sound, figurative comparisons are going to be extremely important. It was as loud as a car horn. Okay, remember, there is figurative imagery, figurative sensory detail. With sound, that's going to be really important. With taste, we want to remember that we're capable of experiencing several different tastes. Sweet, sour, bitter, salty. If you want to go farther and talk about things like umami, that's fine. But generally, you want to frame your discussion of taste around those things that we can taste. You also want to talk about, okay, again, is it pleasant, unpleasant? And you want to think about the essence. Now, oftentimes when we're talking about the essence, this comes down to a figurative comparison. So someone eats something and they say, this has a very floral quality, or this has a very savory quality, or this has a very, even going more specific, chocolatey quality. That's the essence of the flavor. You're making a comparison in certain ways. And then, of course, you also want to consider strength. How strong is the taste? With smell, it's very, very closely linked to our sense of taste. So you're going to be considering all of these different aspects similarly to taste, right? The essence of the thing, whether it's pleasant, the strength, things like that. Now, smell is a really, really crucial one to nail because it is our sense that is most strongly connected to our sense of memory. And if you can trigger your reader's sense of memory, you've got them in the palm of your hand. Touch, okay? With this, we're thinking about things like texture, rough, smooth. We're thinking about size, how big something feels. And we're thinking about temperature, how hot or cold it is. And again, figurative comparisons can fit right in there. With emotion, generally, we're trying to think about both intensity and a figurative comparison. Her anger was as strong as 1,000 suns, or his sadness was as deep as the ocean. We're thinking about both how intense the feeling is, okay? And then we're often trying to create a comparison. That's the easiest way for us to communicate those feelings. Now, I've got a few tips for you. First of all, think about tone and mood. As a good writer, you should be thinking about this from the very beginning. What is the tone I want to communicate, and what is the mood I want my reader to experience? So keep your desired tone and mood in mind while you're writing, and orient your writing and your diction around that. If you want the reader to experience a happy mood, okay, including like a sensory detail like the old hamburger grease had the queasy odor of putrefying death, doesn't make sense. Your details should fit with whatever your intended mood is. In fact, please, again, I'm going to say this, just be aware of the tone and mood you want in every single piece of writing that you do, okay? What do I want the reader to think my attitude towards this subject is? What feelings do I want my reader to experience while they're while they're reading? Okay. Tip number 2, you got to describe rather than just tell, okay? When you boil down your sensory descriptions to one-word things like the chocolate smelled good or the car or was red or it felt like sick, okay, it's super lame and it doesn't help anybody because it doesn't actually describe. It gives us the most basic information and tells us to figure it out ourselves. Overly simple description looks bush league. It looks amateur and it's going to turn people off and make them less likely to pay attention to what you have to say. And it's also going to prevent them from getting crucial pieces of information that will give them a deeper understanding of whatever it is you're talking about. Second half of this, okay? How do we describe rather than tell? Well, one of the biggest ways is we use descriptive words like adjectives and adverbs, but we also use comparative language like similes to flesh out these descriptions. Throwing in just one or two descriptive words or pieces of comparative language can completely transform your sensory details and make them more precise, more engaging, and more useful for your reader. So if we're looking at those from the previous slide, okay, we transformed our first one by adding some adjectives and a little bit of a simile. The rich, roasty fragrance of the chocolate smelled like a holiday. Wow, way better. We're getting actual details. I'm actually being told what the chocolate smells like. 2, the car was a gleaming crimson color, like a shiny candy apple. Again, just using very, very minor, just a couple of words, okay, like gleaming in there to help enhance that visual detail. And then adding that simile kicker at the end to give it a little bit of that figurative imagery. And then finally, it had the same supple, delicate smoothness of silk. Supple, delicate. Now we're creating tone. Now we're creating mood. Now we're inviting our reader to understand the world that we are describing. Okay, final tip. Take advantage of opportunities. This is just a general thing for all writing. You need to be on the lookout for opportunities to add sensory details. A huge misconception is that these kinds of things can only be put into creative writing, but that is silly, children. That is silly. Sensory detail can be used in every type of writing if you're using it purposefully and with intelligence. And it will enhance every type of writing if you're using it purposefully and with intelligence. So you have to be on the lookout for areas that need description. Do not limit this, okay, this technique, incredibly useful technique, to just creative pieces. Remember, sensory details help us communicate ideas. All right, children. So what you need to do now that you've gotten all of this stuff, there is on the second page of your notes document, a few exercises. First, revise the sensory detail revision passages. So add and improve sensory detail within the passages and be mindful of the necessary mood you need for those passages. Keep in mind that your revision should help to develop and support this mood. Then choose an option from the sensory detail original composition options and compose your own completely original piece. It should have a distinct mood that you pick out and that you support with your language. You should use the advice offered in this video. You should utilize all 5 senses and emotions in your written piece, and it should be at least 200 words. That's not super crazy, but I think it's enough to get description across. But if you want to go harder than that, please do. Go hog wild. I'm begging you. All right, guys, have a great day. We talk to you all soon.